Welcome to Parent Squad. I'm Felicia Lawrence, and today we're getting into a topic that will spark some discussion for sure. We're talking youth sports and performing arts, and then the pressure that some kids feel to succeed at their passions. So here to talk more about this is Lauren Fadeley Veyette. She is the head of school at Indianapolis School of Ballet, and we're also joined by Dr. Elaine Gilbert, who's a clinical psychologist at Riley Children's Health. Ladies, welcome.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for being here. This is actually a really important topic just because I think a lot of people can relate. So Lauren, can we start off? Can you just tell us your story?
Yes, well, I started dancing when I was quite young and realized that this was the career path I wanted to take. So I made some drastic moves, if you will, and I actually went to New York City when I was 15 years old to train at the School of American Ballet. And at 16 years old, I was taken into the New York City Ballet as a full-time professional job. And I danced there for 2 years, and while I was still in high school. So a lot of pressure, a lot of adjustments that happened while I was there. I also got injured during that time, so that was another element to deal with at a young age. And so I ended up having a wonderful career. I chose to leave New York City Ballet after my time there and go to Indiana University, which I felt like really gave me the overall roundness that I needed for my future.
Yes.
So I danced professionally for over 20 years, and now I'm a teacher and I'm able to pass down everything I learned, not just in the studio, but mentally as well to my students.
And I love that you said that, because there are a lot of great children that do well in school, or they do well in an activity, or they do well in whatever it is, and then maybe not so much as an individual, as a person, as an individual. That's something they have to work on. So how did those experiences kind of change your approach to teaching? The fact that you were kind of in it yourself at a very high level.
I think I was, obviously influenced by the people that I worked with, and some of those elements were positive and some of those were not. And so knowing that I can now break the cycle of some of the ways that I was taught, and being able to pass down in a healthy manner now the traditions of ballet, and being able to support the whole person, not just the dancer.
And we're going to talk more about that. Dr. Gilbert, as we said earlier, is a child clinical psychologist, and you actually have programs as well that helps with the resiliency of young people and helps young people with their mental health. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yes, we created the Mental Resiliency Training Program in partnership with Indianapolis Public Schools, as well as the Children's Foundation at Riley and the Mia Rose Owens Foundation. And that's really allowed us to instill and work to teach the psychology through sport, and that lens of allowing us space for science and adaptation and then trial of these skills in real time. And I think it's been so exciting to see how it helps not only with confidence and goal setting, but also with other pillars that we know are fundamental for children's wellness, like communication, being able to handle distress and hard, and to cope with that in adaptive and healthy ways.
And so in both of your respective lanes, how do you all navigate the pressures of the busy schedules that comes from being a high-achieving athlete or a performing artist or something like that, and just kind of the reality of burnout, being able to face that head on?
Go ahead.
Well, as a dancer myself, I definitely faced burnout. Like I said, when I was a professional at such a young age, I felt like I had achieved my dreams, and I was like, this is not what I expected. This is way too much, and I'm not ready for it. And so I actually did take a break from dancing for a little bit before I chose to go to college. And it was not something that was the norm at that time, but it is something that gave me the longevity of my career ultimately. And it is something that I pass down to my students, and I recognize those signs when they are feeling overwhelmed or overworked. And I'm like, if you need to take some time, then you need to do that. That is what will be what's best for you. Even if it's just a night or a week, they're doing so much in school all day, and the homework and all the other activities, and then we're expecting so much of them when they come into the studio, and same for, you know, the athletics. And so just remembering their age and everything that they're doing is so important. So I sympathize with them, and it is better in the long run.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Dr. Gilbert, what's your approach?
I think to validate is that we see the biggest juxtaposition and the hardest time when athletes actually ascend to the higher levels. And so that makes total sense that that happened and occurred, but it doesn't make it easier to understand it, right?
Yes.
And so what we think about is balancing want-tos and have-tos. We all have have-tos, and they might not be our favorite things. They might not be our most preferred things, but we still have to get them done, right? But we need to integrate the want-tos, and then we need to find not necessarily even a balance, and we're getting away from the idea of even pace, but a rhythm. There's busy opportunities or seasons and rhythm to that, but we also need to make sure that we're instilling rest, recovery, and the recharge, whether that's social, whether that's independent creativity and exploration. That all helps with identity development beyond sport or performance.
Yeah, I always think you are more than just what you do.
Yes.
You know, like, yes, you are a dancer, but you are a human first. Same with an athlete, you know, and having those other passions outside of what you do. So it doesn't just define you.
Absolutely, and a big word that you said to me, Dr. Gilbert, was balance.
Oh, yes.
That really, really stood out. Okay, so we know that parents want their kids to be successful, but sometimes they can also be living vicariously through their child, and that can increase the pressure. I'm sure you've seen this, Lauren.
Yeah, it can be hard. I think what I try to do is, you know, we are the professionals, we are the teachers, and so let us be the ones that help guide your students through this, and trust our opinions with what your student is going through. And I think it's them too, trusting their own child and letting them experience it for themselves. And if they want to do it or if they don't want to do it, I think that's sometimes really hard too, when parents are like pushing somebody to do something that they don't want to do. And we've had those conversations where, you know, it's, if you don't want to be doing this, it's too hard and a lot of money and time, you know, to be putting into these activities if it's not something you're truly passionate about. So they are hard conversations, but I think you have to really listen to your child and what they are saying and what they are needing. If there's always a reason why they don't want to go to that activity, there might be something more to it.
Yeah. Dr. Gilbert, I'm sure you've had to pull some parents into the room and have that tough conversation with them before.
Yes, it made me think of, like, yes, avoidance happens, and we get an idea that avoidance is a negative thing, but it actually gives us a lot of good data, right? So if they are avoiding things, break that cycle, but also recognize and understand that that's a coping experience, that we're working to either instill or recharge resource allocation.
Yeah.
That avoidance isn't a bad strategy, it's just a strategy, right? But it also brings up the idea of misguided support, where it's either too much or too little, kind of like the Goldilocks and the Three Bears story. And especially during adolescence, it's hard and it might change very quickly on people. And so it's that idea of balancing. What is the child communicating? We have to hear them. And in order for them to be successful, they still have to do it. And so if there's conflict, then we need to give that respect and space.
Yeah, respect and space. Okay, you really kind of touched on it a moment ago, as you were saying, when people get ready to level up to like a new level of intensity, or they're going to a greater level of competition, that's when you tend to see a lot of issues. How do you talk to parents about helping their child navigate the level up, essentially?
I think about it as, like, you can support them, so we can help prime them, we can give them accountability, you can help with the resource allocation, but it's a lot of, like, creating space for rest, breath, visualization, cueing them on hydration, right? Fuel is so important and it's often forgotten, but fuel is training too. And so being there to help support all needs as a human first, and then secondarily in whatever other extracurricular idea or identity they're trying on.
Yes, and then I imagine you try to coach the children as well as parents.
Yeah, I think for the parents, you know, just being their rock, being there for them, because I know, at least for ballet, it's not as much of a team sport. It is very individual, and there's a lot of this idea of I can't do something well one day, that means that I'm a bad dancer now. And that is definitely not the case. So as teachers, we're trying to help them with that. But I think for the parents to just listen to that and be supportive of that for their students is really important, because when they're in the studio, it can get emotional, and it is hard for them when they see someone next to them doing that turn that they really want to accomplish in that moment. So having a safe space to come to at home to be able to discuss those things is really important.
Yeah, to your point, recognizing that it's good and bad days.
Yes, absolutely.
Which I personally see in my workouts. So when you're talking about physicality, when it comes to that, it's good and bad days, but I guess for other things too. All right, another possibility is rejection, not making the team, not getting the role they wanted or what they're talking about, or just not really hitting the mark. There's still value, there's still worth, but you still have to help ground your children in that identity and self-worth. How would you say the best way to do that is, Dr. Gilbert?
I think it's a couple of things. I think it's one, recognizing their worth beyond just that one moment. Validate the emotion, validate the experience, and then as both supporting them in an individual form, but also as a family. Is this something we want to use as fuel? Does this mean we invest more, that we try harder? Recognizing that most people aren't successful at anything the first time they try, at least in full form, right?
Right.
And so try again. That feedback, especially feedback, even if not making the team or making the perfect solo, right? That's not the reality often. And so we come back and we persevere. That's what resiliency is. And that happens outside of sports. We've got to practice it together through sport.
Yeah, and I feel like, in ballet, they do some competitions, and when we do them, we're not going there to win first place. Right. And for me, I always tell the dancers, it's about the process that we took to get there. It's about the rehearsals that we worked on and seeing where you started to where you got to at the end. Just because you didn't place in a medal at the competition doesn't mean that you did not achieve so much throughout that process. And that's why we do it. That's why we work on those things. And another thing too, I think, is helping people understand that sometimes it's not an excuse, but there are trivial things that do lead to this. Like at least for Nutcracker, a lot of it's based off of height and how many costumes we have, and a lot of times that you can't change that. You cannot change how tall you are at your age, So I think parents being able to help their students understand that as well. Like, this was not anything you could have done in that moment. So let's keep this momentum and keep working. Yeah. And maybe next year there'll be a bigger opportunity available for where you are in your height.
Yeah, I like that you said that too, because you can't control everything.
Yeah.
And so much of this, if you are just a smaller sixth grader, you're a smaller sixth grader.
Right.
And maybe that will change and maybe it won't, but that doesn't change your value or your worth or what you bring to the table.
Control your controllables.
Cool.
Yes.
Yeah,
I like that.
I like that. Yeah. Okay, so what are some of the other positive traits? We keep talking about mental resiliency. We've touched a little bit on communication. What are some of the other things you see in your young dancers when you're trying to help them develop and navigate through the competitive process?
I wonder self-talk.
Yes, yeah. Absolutely.
Having positive or neutral self-talk, right? We have a lot of thought traps that happen in our brains, and we're kind of our greatest critic inside. And so if we can work through that or adapt that, at least to neutralize that feedback to ourselves, that can be helpful and powerful. But I also mimic that with team talk, for instance. So while dance is an independent, I wonder if that happens just naturally in that space too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. If I'm showing someone a step, they'll be like, I can't do that. And I'm like, well, you haven't even tried. So if you say you can't do it, then you cannot do it.
Yeah.
But you have to mentally prepare yourself and say, okay, I can do this. I can try to do this, and I will work on getting to do this. But yeah, absolutely. You have to you have to believe in yourself first in order to get there.
And I love the can't word
Yes.
because I hear that often. And can't's like a good reminder of like, I won't, I don't have resources to, or I'm not able to. But can't's not necessarily a definitive. And so challenge can't when it happens.
Yeah, yeah, and they're still students. That's what
Right.
I always remind them as well. That's why you're here, and that's why you have teachers. Even
We're not here to be perfect.
Yeah,
we're
even
here to learn and grow.
yeah, and even professional dancers, professional athletes, they still have coaches. As a professional dancer, they still take class every single day, just like as students do. So nobody.
Such a good point.
Yeah, I'm like everybody is. You're a continual student. So you're, So
You look at some of the top sports athletes, they all have coaches. They all have practice. So that makes a lot of sense. They all continue to work on themselves. I feel like we have given a lot of advice to parents and how they need to be helping their children, but this is equally beneficial. I feel like this is what we need to be telling ourselves. That's one thing for myself anyway. I'm always like, what advice would you give somebody else? You would tell somebody else if they were sitting here giving you the problem, you would say, it's okay. Don't be so hard on yourself. Just keep showing up, even if it's not the best workout or you didn't hit your weight goal or whatever. You keep coming back the next day. Just don't stop. Just keep going. And so I always ask myself, like, what advice? Because, a lot of times we can be easier on other people than we really are with ourselves. And it's something you have to learn, which I think is so important. Okay, Lauren, before we go, I do have to ask, I know you were actually in Black Swan.
I was.
And so the actual movie.
Yes.
Tell us more. What was that like? What was the experience? I mean, my goodness.
Yeah, I mean, talking about psychological pressures of, ballet.
Yeah,
there it is, right there. I was dancing in Pennsylvania Ballet at the time, and they wanted the corps de ballet to be actual dancers that work together. So
Absolutely.
appreciate that. And for 3 weeks, we all went and filmed in New York for Black Swan. We took class with Natalie Portman and Mila Kunis, and it was fun. We did not realize it was going to be what it became when we were filming. It was a lot of just random scenes, and did not know that it was going to become the big blockbuster that it ended up being.
And I know they used the power of television and the power of film in some of those scenes, but I mean, did Natalie Portman and Mila Kunis, did they have ballet experience beforehand where they could kind of go into this and act?
They did train a lot. They did a really intensive training, but obviously 6 months versus like 16 years is a big difference. So they did have some doubles that would stand in for them. But for the scenes that they did in their upper body work, they did a very nice job.
Oh, they did wonderful. Dr. Gilbert, before we go, were there any performances that you need to share?
I do not have a dance background, but I applaud it.
Okay, sports, anything, we'll take anything. Okay, I didn't want to leave you out
Thank
there.
you.
Really a great conversation. I appreciate it. Like I said, I feel like I got a lot out as an individual, and maybe we need to be talking to ourselves a little bit better as parents so we can continue to model that positive behavior. We have more info on WTHR.com/Parent Squad. Stick around, we've got more good stuff coming up.